We'll go ahead and call tonight's regular city council meeting to order. For tonight's invocation, it will be provided by Pastor Ken Manning of the Taylorville Christian Church. Pastor.
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, I once again come before you asking you to give guidance and wisdom to these leaders of our community, that they may govern in a fair and honest way, and that their decisions may honor you and be the best for the citizens of our city. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Larry Bud.
Here.
Sean Bertle.
Here.
George Nez.
Here.
Rob Heberly.
Here.
Bruce Jones.
Here.
Ray Kuntz.
Here.
Martin Boda.
Here.
Earl Walters.
Here.
All 8 aldermen present. Okay, the first thing we have is a motion to utilize the omnibus
So moved.
vote
Second.
for approval of the minutes of the previous meeting listed on tonight's agenda under the title Omnibus Vote Designation. Motion by Alderman Dorchenez, second by Alderman Jones. Discussion or comment? Roll call.
Sean Bertle.
Yes.
Marty Dorchenez.
Yes.
Rob Heberly.
Yes.
Bruce Jones.
Yes.
Ray Kuntz.
Yes.
Martin Boda.
Yes.
Earl Walters.
Yes.
Larry Bud.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Okay, the minutes we'll be approving will be the minutes of the Street and Sewer Committee meeting held October 6, 2014, minutes of the regular meeting held October 6, 2014, minutes of the special council meeting held August 6, 2014, minutes of the Ordinance Committee meeting held October 16, 2014, and minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held October 16, 2014. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved, Your Honor.
Alderman Walters, have a second?
Second.
Alderman Bud. Discussion or comment? Roll call, please.
Marty Dorchenez.
Yes.
Rob Heberly.
Yes.
Bruce Jones.
Yes.
Ray Kuntz.
Yes.
Martin Boda.
Yes.
Earl Walters.
Yes.
Larry Bud.
Yes.
Sean Bertle.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Okay, is there anyone here with the Illinois Women in Business to represent them? Okay, would you please stand? I've got a proclamation I'd like to read here. And I've actually got the proclamation to give to you, but because my eyesight, I increased the font size, and I will read this and then hand it to you. Whereas the Illinois Federation of Business Women's Clubs Incorporated was chartered with the Illinois Secretary of State in December of 1919 and continues today as the premier organization of women helping women. Whereas the Illinois Federation of Business Women's Clubs Incorporated's primary mission is to advocate professional and personal growth, leadership development and participation, equity and economic self-sufficiency for working women through education, legislation, and networking. Whereas the Illinois Federation of Business Women's Clubs Incorporated has been instrumental in the passage of the Illinois Fair Pay Act, the legislation to prevent drive-through mastectomy surgery, legislation that provides for longer stay in the hospital for new mothers, and numerous legislative acts furthering the well-being of women and their families. And whereas the Illinois Federation of Business Women's Clubs Incorporated continues to be involved in passage of the Illinois bill to put equal rights for women into the U.S. Constitution, and whereas the Illinois Federation of Business Women's Clubs Incorporated has over 300 members located throughout the state of Illinois that provide leadership and service to their communities, and whereas the membership of the Taylorville IFBW local organization provide ongoing service to their community, and whereas we are proud of their leadership and service to their community, now therefore it be resolved that I, Greg Brotherton, Mayor of the City of Taylorville, County of Christian, do hereby proclaim October 19th through the 25th, 2014, as Illinois Women in Business Week in the City of Taylorville, and that all citizens of the City of Taylorville are encouraged to join in the salute to working women by celebrating the achievements of women in business as they contribute to our economic, civic, and cultural purposes, and that a copy of this resolution be given to the co-presidents of the local organization of the IFBW, commemorating the efforts of their members on behalf of all working women. So, on behalf of the Taylor City Council, I make this presentation.
I just wanted to say it's an honor to lead this group of women in our local organization and to be a part of the state association. We have, like in all years past, a variety of activities planned for this week here in the city. And I know one of the causes that's near and dear to you, Mayor Brotherton, is the Christian County Senior Center. We're going to go serve a meal to them, and then we have a donor dinner, organizations that we raise funds to support their cause. We will be giving those checks on Thursday night. So anyway, thank you very much for your support. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda, we have a resolution. This being an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between the city and Johnson Township in regards to borrowed equipment. Alderman Walters, can I get a second?
Second.
Who's that? I'm sorry. Oh, Kuntz. Okay, discussion or comment? Roll call, please.
Rob Heatherly?
Yes.
Bruce Jones?
Yes.
Ray Coontz? Mark Voda?
Yes.
Earl Walters?
Yes.
Red Bud?
Yes.
Sean Bertle?
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Okay, next we have a resolution. This being a real estate lease agreement with Rick and Lisa Champley.
I'll go ahead and make that motion, Your Honor, with a comment.
Second. Alderman Voda, second by Alderman Jones. Go ahead with the comment. Alderman Voda.
Gentlemen, the copy you have in your package, we have amended. We have an amended copy. I worked with the city attorney and Mr. Champley today to finalize what we're going to actually look at agreeing to. And I will turn this over to Mr. Romano to explain exactly which changes were made and why.
Gentlemen, if you'll turn to page 1, the third paragraph down, we actually identified that easement. The best we know on that Ameren easement is going to be 1.856 acres. That was the last dimension that we were made aware of. So that was plugged in there. Then down at the last sentence, the leased premises is going to consist of 62 acres, more or less, taking 2 acres from the 64 that was there before. In paragraph number 1, the amount of the rent has been inserted as $1,280 upon execution of this agreement, with all proceeds to be placed into the Lake Restoration Fund. That language has been added. Turn then to, and there was a typo there on that right before that where it says as rent. There was a couple of words there that got omitted. It should just read as rent, comma, tenant shall pay. And then as far as the use of the premises, down at the bottom of paragraph 4, we've taken out, I think, what was it, the deer and the whatever was else in there, I can't remember.
Deer
now.
and dove.
Deer and dove. We've changed it like it was in the prior lease that just says for the sole purposes of personal hunting and for youth hunting activities. The understanding is that there is turkey hunting going out there in addition to those other two, and also some squirrel
That was the
also.
other one that came to the table.
So that was added to it. Then flipping over to page 5, because that language was changed at the very top where it talks about if applicable an Illinois deer permit, we added and all other applicable Illinois or federal hunting permits depending upon the animals that they're hunting for. Skip down to the 5th paragraph. It'll start out by saying then, since firearm discharges shall be per state statute, which I understand from Mr. Champley is actually within 300 yards of any residence, and then continue, and nowhere else shall be shot within 100 yards. And then if you'll skip down to where it says following our permissible hunting aids, there was a typo. It should say number 4, freestanding elevated tripod deer stand, not deed stand. With those changes, I think Mr. Champley, as he's behind me, he's in
Yes.
agreement with it, and I think Alderman Vota has talked with Mr. Jackson. He's okay with the way the language is. And you'll notice, you'll see a lot of the bullet points that we talked about at committee is in there. Some of them were not included because we didn't limit how many hunters could be out there at a time because of the youth hunting activities. But you should recognize many of the bullet points that we had, you guys discussed, and I think approved at the committee level, that I tried to incorporate in this new lease form. So, any questions?
Okay. Alderman Voda, you want to amend your,
Yes, Your Honor, go ahead and amend
Motion?
As presented.
as a, okay, and Alderman Jones, your
Yes.
second? Okay. Additional questions, the Alderman? Roll call, please.
Bruce Jones.
Yes.
Ray Coontz. Martin Voda.
Yes.
Earl Walters.
Yes.
Larry Bud.
Yes.
Sean Bertle.
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez.
Yes.
Rob Heatherly.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Okay, late last week I met with the school officials, and they would like the city council to support a resolution in support of education funding reform. I did put copies in your packets there. Without going into a lot of the detail, this is a kind of supporting a bill sponsored by Senator Andy Minar regarding the redistribution of school funds and the formula they use. And so basically it's not costing taxpayers additional money, but it's redistributing some of it that's going to, you know, some of the places up north maybe, down here to I guess we would term the poor or those in more need down here in the southern part of the state. It's got a long way to go. It's got to get through you know, the Senate and the House as well, and whether it goes through this session or not remains to be seen. People I've talked to aren't overly optimistic, but we want to be prepared. So they asked us to please put this on our agenda and see if we could pass that to help them out. So I would entertain a motion to pass that resolution.
I'll make that motion with the correction also.
Okay, Alderman Walters.
Second.
Second by Bertle. Go ahead, Alderman
On
Walters.
the second page, and this has already been caught, it says President should say Mayor.
Okay. Make that correction. All right. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Ray Coontz.
Yes.
Martin Voda.
Yes.
Earl Walters.
Yes.
Larry Bud.
Yes.
Sean Bertle.
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez.
Yes.
Rob Heatherly.
Yes.
Bruce Jones.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Okay, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, I would like to respectfully ask that the aldermen limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes on what has been a somewhat controversial topic. At this point, I don't think there's any need to admonish anyone for their stance on this issue or what should or should not have been done prior to bringing this before the City Council. I think it is important to note for the record that the city has received petitions with over 1,300 signatures opposing the actions that the proposed ordinance we'll be looking at would allow. So with that said, again, I'd like to go to the next item. This is the ordinance amending the standard operation guideline 211 concerning the Taylorville Fire Department ambulance deployment. And I'd entertain a motion to approve that ordinance. Alderman Bertle.
Second.
Second by Alderman Dorchenez. Now, I'd like to open it for discussion. If you don't have anything to say, that's fine, but I want to give everyone the opportunity. So if it's all right, Alderman Koontz, would you like to start, and we'll just move on down the line here?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. I met with, I've talked with the mayor and both agencies over the phone at length. And my main concern over all this is the safety of the residents overall. And after those conversations, we have come to the conclusion we would meet at least every quarter this next year and discuss those issues, but not also the negative issues, but anything we can do positively for the community as well. And after speaking with the mayor and both agencies, I will be withdrawing my support for this. My concerns and needs, I believe, are satisfied at this time.
Okay.
And I'll just leave it at that. And I thank the mayor, I thank Ms. Dunn, and I thank Mr. Sutton for taking their time and going over these things with me. Thank you.
Alderman Walters.
Thank you, Your Honor. My position has not changed. I support the Taylorville Fire Department being on call, not rotation, but on call, if requested.
Alderman Heberly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 2 points I made at the last council meeting and at the previous emergency services meeting that prior Thursday, I still stand by those, and I haven't wavered on that. Going forward, though, and I think Alderman Koontz has an excellent idea of it, but I want this to be a three-way street. I don't think that the privates ought to kowtow to the city or the Taylorville Fire Department. I think there ought to be an exchange of communication from all three sides. They being the privates, don't have to show us anything. I believe that we need to show them the same respect that the Taylorville Fire Department wishes to be accorded to them. Thank you.
Alderman Dorchenez.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I had
9 calls about this issue. There were 6 people that were for or against this passing. There were 3 people that was for it. I got 1 call today from a lady that was up at Chili Fest and had talked to several people that represented the ambulance services we have in town. Part of the information that was disseminated was that this issue is going to raise taxes if it's passed. I don't agree with that. But if you tell people you're going to raise taxes, they don't care what the issue is. They're going to tell you they're not for it. So I think a lot of the signatures on the petitions were skewed because of that. Also, the Breeze Courier had a poll. The Breeze Courier poll showed that the people that called in were in favor of it. But by the same token, in defense of the ambulance service, if somebody calls in, and one person could call in several times, you would never know that. So I don't know how good a poll that was. I had a question that I would like the city attorney to address. I talked to him today. I had a question. The person said that if the ordinance remained the same and either Dunn or Sutton showed up on rotation and the Taylorville Fire Department shows up at every call, what would be the situation? What would happen if, in fact, Dunn's, let's say, that came to the call, Taylorville Fire Department came to the call, the person under the current ordinance refused to have Dunn transport them, and so they requested Taylorville at the time, even though it's against the ordinance. Would you tell everybody what you told me today?
Well, assuming this proposed ordinance does not pass and you're left with what's on the books today, your fire department could not respond, could not honor that request to take that particular patient to the hospital or wherever. You would just have to politely say we cannot. Now that's, you by law have the right to set the rules and regulations how your ambulance operates. Your fire department must follow that. If they don't follow that, then of course you're left with disciplinary action against the persons involved in that situation. We would hope, I suppose, as I told you, that if that scenario occurs, that in that specific instance, perhaps that other ambulance would say, consider us unavailable, go ahead and save this guy's life and make him feel better and take him to the hospital. That's the only option you have. And that's when I was suggesting to you that it may be wise to have further discussions as to, with the 3 agencies, to talk about how do you define what is being unavailable. So if you had Sutton's in Springfield with a patient, unavailable, and Dunn gets called down to a auto accident on the border of Christian County, only to arrive there in Hillsborough or Montgomery County shows up, someone here calls in for a heart attack and needs to get to the hospital right away, should that ambulance being that far away, is that being unavailable? And that's just common sense type of questions that I think all 3 agencies would probably use and discuss and decide what's best for the patient. And those kind of discussions, I think, should go on. But absent that, your ordinance says what it is. Your fire department has to refuse the request unless the other 2 ambulances are unavailable, and that's from a legal standpoint.
It's probably pretty important to point out that, as far as I know, that never ever happened.
Correct.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
The question was posed to me.
Sure.
And that's how I responded to it.
Sure.
And you've had it for 2 years, and nothing has happened, so it may never happen. But that was not the question.
And that's the question that was posed to me. I just passed it along.
That's fine. So let's hope it doesn't happen.
Alderman Bertle.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate one thing Alderman Kuhn said was, initially we put this on the Emergency Services Committee meeting, and there's been some accusations that, he tried to slide it in the middle of the night, or there wasn't enough time for conversation or something of that order. And that's truly not what happened. This particular item got on the agenda the same way as the 500,000 other items been put on every agenda since I've been on the council. It gets put on there the Friday before, basically, is when we get our packets. And we have that entire week to call the chairman, call the mayor, call whoever we need to call to get additional information about whatever item that is. And then we come to the committee meeting, we have the committee meeting, it comes out of that meeting, whether it's
in favor of it or opposed to it, and it comes to council, and that's the process. So if there was anything done or appeared that something was done that was, not handled properly, that's not the case. It was handled the same way as everything else that we conduct business through the city council. The other thing was that, I think that some of the information that's been handed out, and I think Alderman Dorothy touched on this a little bit, once somebody hears the word rotation, I got 8 phone calls, and it was even Stevens, 4 against, 4 opposed. 4 of those phone calls was from business owners. 2 of them were in favor. 1 was adamantly against the government being involved in it. And the last one, they started off the conversation as, I do not want the city of Taylorville Fire Department's ambulance in rotation. I said, okay. I said, that's not what they're asking technically. So then they wanted an explanation on it. So once I explained to them that they were in a backup role now, and that they were asking to be in a request role but not in rotation, although some of them understood it and were in favor of it, some of them understood it and were not in favor of it. And I do understand, I think Randy Miller brought this point up at the last meeting, is that if we take one call, if the Taylorville Fire Department would go into a request situation now, if we took one call from one of the privates, that would take income from those private individuals, and that would affect their bottom dollar. And I understand that. But as a job as an alderman, I have to take that in consideration with the information that I've received about this particular issue and say, is that okay as far as a person's choice? And from the information that I've received in the phone calls, there's nothing that has changed my mind yet. I would be open to it if it would come, but with the poll saying that most people are in favor of it, with the 8 phone calls I got, it's half and half. I can't sit up here and say that, something or someone has changed my opinion of this, because they haven't. So I still support it in a request mode. It sounds like that most people that have contacted me would not be in favor of it in rotation, but I can't make that determination either with a little bit of information I've gotten from the public.
Thank you. Alderman Bud.
Okay. Over 1.5 years ago, I asked Chief Cruz if you could request the Taylorville Fire for ambulance service. His response was no. So I asked why, and he said the ordinance adopted states that it was for backup only. So then I asked if someone came to the fire department and needed an ambulance, could they transport? And again, the answer was no. Also, if the fire department were holding a training session at the firehouse and someone was having a life-threatening situation, would they have to call 911? And they would have to call 911 and request one of the services to respond. Otherwise, they would be reprimanded or disciplined if they were to transport. After looking into this, I also found out they could only respond if the other 2 companies were out of service or in service. And they had let 911 know that they were unavailable. These firefighters are trained EMTs and paramedics and are ready to respond. But with this ordinance, they have to stand back and wait. If they are out on an ambulance call and someone needs help, can they treat that person? But they would need to wait for another ambulance. My point is, if one ambulance companies were to come up upon a fire and someone was trapped inside and they could save that life, would they stand back and wait for the fire department and save that life? I would hope not. They would save that life. With this said, I hope everyone joins together and to do what's best for the community. And I in no way want to see either a private company lay off employees or go out of business. I would also like to thank everyone for coming to tonight's meeting and get involved. One final thought. Let's form a committee on both sides, work for a solution that would benefit the whole community.
Thank you. Alderman Voda.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe I was the only one who walked out of the special city council meeting making the statement that I had a lot of questions. I supported this going to a draft mode only because if the questions were answered and it was the best thing for the community, we were ready to roll with this thing, being that it's an emergency services vehicle that I would want to be ready to go. So in that time, I've had several questions. I posted to the chief. I've talked with the Dunn's rep. Paula was good enough to talk with me. I talked with Aaron Sutton. They both visited with me on phone calls, and I have talked to several of the employees also. I think with the, I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time, but I was able to get several questions put together, and the ones that were posted, and I'm still waiting on several answers from, If there are concerns with private ambulance services, why then was this not taken to a meeting scheduled with all parties to discuss, and then pursue solutions before asking the City Council to amend resolutions? Number one. Number two, if the Taylorville Fire Department were to become the only ambulance service provided for Taylorville and for the Taylorville Fire Protection District, and that could happen, how do you propose financing of multiple ambulance units, required additional personnel, associated known and unknown costs, and monies to cover pension payments? That's a big one, people. That's a big one for the municipalities. Should the unit roll and the patient is not able to pay or has no insurance, who's going to foot that bill? What guarantee is there that the full cost associated with the roll of the unit or units will be completely covered by insurance or other financial provision? Once the grant monies are exhausted, and we have firefighters who are currently being covered by grants to pay salaries and their pensions, I believe. Once the grant monies are exhausted, how do you propose to absorb additional payroll costs of current staffing, not to mention the potential need for additional personnel? All these costs are going to accrue and begin to cost the city. Before the city commits to providing more services, the City Council needs to be given the opportunity and the time to consider the effects that changes to the current policy and procedure may have both short and long-term effects. That needs to be researched, ladies and gentlemen. One of the other things, and I did a lot of looking and a lot of researching online, and that's where a lot of information is at. One of the things that came to light was, does government need to provide a service when an adequate non-government solution already exists? Service duplication without sufficient need leads to higher expenses and poorer providers for the system as a whole. That comes from a web page called ambulancejunkie.com, private versus the fire. I've got all kinds of other things up here that's related to what could occur. A lot of it's Medicaid, how things are paid for, what the city may or may not get in the way of funding. And the last comment was the private ambulance companies, whether big or small, are focused solely on one goal, and that's to provide emergency care and transportation to those who are injured or ill. The Taylorville Fire Department, in my opinion, is second to none. You guys put your lives on the line every time that rig rolls, and I appreciate it probably more than anybody because I've known some of the training you've had to go through. I respect you more than probably anybody in this community unless they've gone to some of this training. When you roll that vehicle, you don't know if you're coming back to say hi to your kids and your mom and your dad. And I respect that. You're putting your lives on the line every time you get up, go to work, and hopefully you're going home safe that night. The police officers are the same way. At this time, I can't support this because we do have an adequate ALS, which is Advanced Life Support, ambulatory service here in town. We have 2 of them. And with that, I thank God that we do have the training in our fire department to be able to be classified as a backup. And guys, keep doing what you're doing. We're proud of you. Thank you.
Alderman Jones.
Okay. I was just trying to add up what everybody took because I wanted to take the rest, but I'm not going to do that. I really appreciate everyone's remarks. I do, because there's feelings both ways. Our community is, like Marty said, is fortunate to have the ambulance companies that we have and the fire department that we have. And regardless of the outcome of this, our firefighters know that this city council has supported them in the past, has supported them in the present. They have some of the best equipment that's out there. We have some of the best trained firefighters out there. And regardless of how this goes out, they know that they have our support. Chief Cruz, Assistant Chief Goodall, know that this council supports them, has, and always will. So with that said, let's roll.
All right. Let's have a roll call vote on this.
Martin Boda.
No?
Earl Walters.
Yes.
Larry Bud.
Yes.
Sean Bertle.
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez.
Yes.
Rob Heatherly.
No.
Bruce Jones.
No?
Ray Coontz. Mayor Brotherton.
My brother votes no. Motion fails 5-4. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, to the ones that were for this. I'd say kind of go into recess just for about 2 minutes here, and if you want to stay and watch what we do, you're welcome. But if you got other things to do tonight, please feel free to leave at this time.
You can go if you
No,
like.
all the aldermen must stay. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Motion to adjourn.
Try.
Rocky, I think it was your comments running everybody off.
It always is.
I was trying to keep track of time. The only people that went over were Rocky and Marty.
Okay, that makes it top dog.
What's that?
You don't want to clap.
That's the way the meeting's supposed to be handled right there. Regardless of the outcome.
They're going to miss attorney's update, my God.
That's why we tape it.
You
That's
could have
why
waited.
we tape it. Yeah.
We got no public.
Okay. Let's move on to city attorney updates.
Gentlemen, 5 things, quickly. I have talked with the state's attorney. If you remember when we talked about the enterprise zone paragraph change, I'm told the county board now has taken a committee and they've approved it, so we're ready to rock and roll. So we'll put something together on that. Also, the Christian County Major Crimes Task Force Intergovernmental Law Enforcement Agreement that you approved probably a month ago has now been approved by PANA and I think the county, and they're passing the signatures around. So that should be finalized quickly. I did send another email to the attorney for IEPA following up on the last discussions. I have not got any feedback yet for that subsequent phone conference that we want to have to clarify their latest proposal. The ordinance violations order has been signed on October 14th. Circuit Clerk's office is in the process. I talked to her today, Circuit Clerk, and they are making the necessary identifications so that your collection agency can begin collecting some funds. So that's in process. And then finally, Jackie and I have had a couple of questions. Pam and I have had a couple of questions. I've also talked to Brett Mason of your investment. A question has come up on your cemetery investments about signing a contract, and then one thing led to another, and I think your cemetery board is wanting to have some discussion about going into some kind of stocks investments as opposed strictly to bonds and so forth. And a question was raised, I raised it, as to whether do we have the power to do that as a municipality. There's several statutes out here as to what you can invest public monies in, most of it which is in government securities that backed by the U.S. government or NCUA or FDIC or collateralized by financial institutions. So we're looking at it. The last conversation we had, Jackie's done some checking with another community. Mr. Mason is going to check with the comptroller and see what they can find out. It's not an easy question because there's several statutes involved. You got the Public Investment Act that talks about what that wouldn't fit, and yet you've got some language of care funds for your perpetual fund, what we're talking about here, that might suggest you can do it. So there's nothing on the table yet, but that discussion is ongoing, and see what happens here. Because I think your cemetery board the thought is that if you put maybe 30% in those kind of volatile funds, when the interest rates rise, and I'm not an investment guy, but the bonds, they value those come down, so it's a question of preserving and increasing the value of your permanent funds. So that's probably going to be put on your table here shortly, but we have to get more information to report back to you. Any questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Alderman Walters.
I believe the way that the cemetery board of managers is set up, though, those decisions can't be theirs solely. It has to still come to the city council.
That's what I think. And when the agreement first approached Pam, or maybe the mayor, I forgot whose desk it went on first, it was for the cemetery board to sign. And we questioned that right off the bat. We think, it's a city-owned cemetery, and you folks should be the one signing the contract or approving that document. So we kicked it back, and that generated this other discussion. So there's nothing signed yet, but any other questions?
Alderman Bertle.
Well, I just want to give you guys some update. That came before the cemetery board of
last meeting because Mr. Mason was there giving his presentation on the Perpetual Care Fund, and he was throwing out ideas. So I think that's where the Cemetery Board of Managers got this idea from. He thought if you wanted to put some money in a different type of fund, you could do that. I don't know that, I'm not trying to talk over Rocky, I'm not sure who's supposed to sign what. That's where that initiated from. And I think Mr. Mason today in our discussion, I think he's come to the conclusion that you folks need to sign, not the Cemetery Board. But yeah, he did reiterate that's what he was giving some investment alternatives to the Cemetery Board. You've got, as I understand, it's like $760,000 in this fund, so it's a pretty sizable chunk of change that they have to take a look at. So,
Alderman Dorchenez, you still have your question?
I guess the question I would like to pass along is the only monies that could be spent from the perpetual fund is the interest on the money. Okay, so when they say interest, I would assume that if you've got any, I don't know, I'm sure we'd have to have an auditor tell us what we can spend out of that money when it's invested.
that's an excellent question. We posed it today to Mr. Mason, because that's my understanding on a perpetual care fund. You can't touch the principal. It's only the earnings off of it, income, dividends, or what have you. And what he was able to tell us today, he's able to go back, I think, to 2006 forward when he left here to go to Decatur. He's not sure what happened beforehand. This thing started out as a $160,000 account, what he was telling us, and it's now grown to $700-some thousand. One would think if it's only been in CDs or bonds, all that is earnings that you can use. But we've asked him to clarify that for us so we know what is principal, what is interest, what can you guys vote to decide to spend out of the interest, and that's what we've asked him to work on as well. But it's an excellent question.
Because at one time it was over 900,000.
Oh, I don't.
Well, it was. And the purpose of the perpetual fund was when the cemetery has been filled up, then there's Mr. Newberry wants to be recognized. When the cemetery has been filled up and they're not getting any more money in to that perpetual fund from the sale of anything, any services or whatever, sale of lots, foundations, there's no money coming in, then the perpetual fund is supposed to be a substantial amount of money to generate enough money. That perpetual fund is supposed to generate enough money to care for the cemetery. And I was on the Board of Cemeteries Board of Managers for 15 years, and so I know a little bit of his background. But anyway, Mr. Newberry's got something to.
Before he speaks, if I may, Jackie just handed me something. There are other funds besides what Raymond James has. Yes. And according to what Jackie tells you, if I don't want to misquote her, the 15% out of every cemetery lot sold gets put into your permanent care fund, which hasn't been going into this Raymond James account. It's been going into other CDs. Is that right?
It actually goes into this account right there.
Goes into a money market account, not in this perpetual care investments that Raymond James is handling. She just handed me a document that shows that Raymond James, as of September 30th, that account's $885,000.
That plus the CD.
No, I'm talking about what Raymond James has.
That's 700,000 in the CD.
Okay, so it's okay. So there's more than one account. And Bill probably knows all the answers right now. He's just itching. I know. I can feel my hair moving here.
He's not making faces.
Bill, did you want to add something?
Jackie answered the question. We do have other funds, other accounts, in addition to the Raymond James. And all this started is, if we put it in, like Rocky's talking about, you're talking $10,000 a year compared to $50,000 or $60,000 a year. And Raymond James, Brad Mason, he wanted, right now it's 95% conservative, 5% and something less. He wants to take it to 70 conservative and 30 with stocks and bonds. He says he can get a yield of 7 to 8%. So,
Having guaranteed.
15% does go into perpetual care, and the interest was calculated all the way back to 1999. and it's being kept track of since then. Terry Grant's done that.
Thank you.
One other point, too, was brought up in our discussion. When we looked into this, there is a statute that requires you folks to have a written investment policy for your cemetery, and we don't think we have that. So Mr. James offered to propose an investment policy for us. I gave him the statutory site, so we should be seeing that shortly, too.
Alderman Heberlin's been waiting.
Well, I'm on the monies that they're talking about investing in a different manner. Is that the earnings that's coming from the current perpetual fund?
I can't answer that, but I suppose it'd be a combination of both, wouldn't it? I mean, if it's, you got the principal and if they're reinvesting the interest and dividends and just tracking it on paper.
Or are they just going to split the account and
I don't know
perhaps
how
do
they do
something
that. That's a good question,
Mr.
Rob. I don't know
Newberry-
that.
But it is with the monies from the perpetual fund.
With the monies that he handles, which is not all the perpetual fund monies.
Does he handle the 885 or how much?
He
does
actually handles the 7. Is this math right? He handles something that says 885.
That's the total of Raymond James plus the CD we have in the local bank.
So his question is, how much is Raymond James alone? 750 something?
700 and some thousand.
So
Yeah,
that
Raymond James.
700 and some thousand is part of the 885,
Yes.
984? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay.
Alderman Walters?
Yes, with my background in insurance and investments over all the years, this all sounds fantastic, but you start speculating in the market. And with something like the perpetual care fund and the lifeblood of the cemetery out there, I think that we need to proceed very carefully and cautiously, and I don't like the idea of speculating to a great degree and that money going down the tubes. And also the more money that the investment people handle, just like when I handle, I make that much more money myself in the commissions. So you get less return than on the dollar. And if he can get 7 and 8%, have him put it in writing. Let's see what he says to that. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions for the city attorney before we move on? All right. We'll move on to mayor updates, and I just have two things. First of all, I want to congratulate the principal of the North Elementary School, Brandy Bruley. She was one of 61 outstanding elementary and middle school principals from across the nation and abroad that were named 2014 National Distinguished Principals by the National Association of Elementary School Principals. And on Friday, she was honored at an awards banquet in Washington, D.C. So we also want to offer our congratulations to her on that great achievement. I also want to send congratulations to the Taylorville Tornadoes football team on winning their game and earning their place as the Apollo Conference champions. This is the first time in 17 years that this happened. Taylorville, won a share of the Apollo Conference on Friday night with a 31-14 win over Mattoon. Now, I haven't watched them that closely this year, but and I just read in the paper, this Tanner Champley rushed for 325 yards on 23 carries. Now, I know enough about football to tell you 325 yards is a lot of yards. I mean, if everyone else left that field, I still couldn't run for 325 yards. It's amazing. So I certainly congratulate them on their success. That's all I got, unless anyone has anything else. We'll move on to committee reports, discussions and or motions to approve, adopt, and or deny, and or table, and or amend, and refer to an appropriate committee in whole or in part the matters regarding the following subject matters discussed at the committee level. Let me start off with the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Your Honor. Motion to accept the FY 2013-2014 audit as presented by Rich Hooper of Lively Mathis, Hooper, and Noblet, subject to reviewing the final draft. Make that form a motion.
Okay. Get a second on that from somebody?
Second.
Alderman Kuntz, discussion or comment? Roll call, please.
Earl Walters?
Yes.
Larry Bud?
Yes.
Sean Bertle?
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez?
Yes.
Rob Heatherly?
Yes.
Bruce Jones?
Yes.
Ray Coontz?
Yes.
Martin Voda?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Motion to donate $1,000 now and $1,000 for the next 2 years to the Christian County CEO program, and this is for the students in the county and surrounding schools to try to keep them here and start up local businesses.
Second.
Second by Alderman Heberlin. Additional discussion or comments? Roll call, please.
Larry Bud?
Yes.
Sean Bertle?
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez?
Yes.
Rob Heatherly?
Yes.
Bruce Jones?
Excuse me, yes.
Ray Coontz?
Yes.
Martin Voda?
Yes.
Earl Walters?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Finally, we have a motion to approve and ratify payment of bills in the amount of $165,908.44.
Make that
Alderman
full
Bud.
motion.
Second by Alderman Walters. Go ahead, Alderman Bud.
Do you want to?
Oh, do you have a question? I'm sorry. go ahead.
Just one question,
Sure.
and just a minor point, and I'm not picking on the fire department. But on page 5, there's a little $210 expenditure down there for T-shirts. And I understand the procedure on all this and everything, but here lately we've talked about supporting our local businesses. And I think where it's possible, and the costs are similar, I think that we need to be supporting our local businesses. So, and again, I'm sure this happens in a lot of the other departments, but I think that when we get the opportunity, instead of going where we normally go, I think we need to search and see if perhaps there isn't a business in our community that we can support. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Bud.
All right. Electric for all departments, $28,655.16. Telephone all departments, $2,222.68. Fuel for all departments, $11,346.89. Big R, Ace, Urban, Menards, and Ron's for miscellaneous, $2,265.50. U.S. Bank for miscellaneous, $2,160.72. Garbage, $1,508. KMRM Insurance, second payment of 4, $11,393. Green and Bradford, $23,738.34. Meyer, Austin, and Romano attorney fees, and of this, $2,145 is ordinance violations, a total of $9,097. Altor for maintenance and equipment rental, $9,696.84. Larry Service Center for tires and repairs, $6,082.14. Unique Temporary Help, $2,784.14. Illinois Department of Revenue for fuel cells, $1,572. Midwest Meter for supplies, $2,967.60. Nokomis Quarry, $1,086.43. Police Department, Ray O'Haron for uniforms and equipment, $9,307.82. Fire Department for uniform allowance, $1,237.39. Lowe's Paving, $1,507. Streets for Rush Truck Centers for supplies, $2,149.92. Sewer Department, J.F. Cody for supplies, $2,671.60. Springfield Plastic for supplies, $2,109.68. Vanderveer Engineering for dairy line repair and the pump, $4,425.20. Janice Ortman for half of the sewer repair reimbursement, $1,125. Water Department for Craig's antenna for a new radio and supplies, $1,035.90. Chemicals, $10,883.60. And the total of these all come to $153,029.55.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Sean Bertle.
Yes.
Bernie Dorchenez.
Yes.
Rob Heatherly.
Yes.
Bruce Jones.
Yes.
Ray Coontz.
Yes.
Mark Voda.
Yes.
Earl Walters.
Yes.
Larry Bud.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Okay, per subparagraph G of 5 ILCS 120/2.06, this portion of the City Council meeting is reserved for any person wishing to address the council on any relevant subject matters concerning the city. Would anyone like to address the City Council? Okay, seeing no one out there, I do want to thank the chief for sticking around tonight. Although I am somewhat disappointed that we didn't get to see a taser displayed, but he was here just in case. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Alderman Bertle.
Second.
Second by Alderman Voda. Discussion or comment? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Meeting adjourned. Does anyone see 7:49?